Hello and welcome to Sophie & Co. I'm Sophie Shepard-Natze. Unmanned aerial vehicles, better known as drones, are in high demand and a multi-million-dollar industry. They're praised for not risking pilots' lives, are a formidable weapon for any army and a nightmare for the enemy. But also loud are the voices who label them unaccountable killing machines and demand their ban. Today we talk about the drone controversy.
Removed from the battle zone, hidden in the desert, miles from the bullets. These pilots fly their aircraft from the ground, hitting targets they see on a computer screen. How much more than a video game is their mission? Are they trigger happy? Do they realize they actually take somebody's life?
Our guest today is Lieutenant Colonel Bruce Black, a retired U.S. Air Force drone pilot. It's really great to have you in our studio today. Now, you're a retired drone operator and now a consultant. And you've said in one of your interviews, I've heard, that the time it took you to get from your home to work to your box from which you were actually carrying out the missions, that was just enough time to put on your game mask, game face. What exactly does that mean?
Well, it's the transition from I guess what you would consider civilian life to the military life, and in particular for Predator pilots, because you are living in a civilian atmosphere and not surrounded constantly by the military, by the wartime mentality. It's an important transition.
Mm-hmm. But did you at any point experience some sort of cognitive dissonance? I mean, 1 minute you're living a normal life, the next you're killing the enemy, and probably civilians as well, via a screen of a battlefield?
If there was any of that, it was going back the other way. It was being able to put it aside as you went back to civilian life.
Mm-hmm. You know, one of the most vocal drone critics is Brandon Bryant, and you've probably heard of him. He was on CNN not too long ago. And he spent several years as a drone sensor operator. Now, he believes that drone technology is very dangerous because it removes the natural psychological fear of kill. That's making the operator detached from what they're doing. Does this describe you in any way?
I don't think so. As a matter of fact, I would say that it's just the opposite. Whenever a strike happens in the Predator community, Predator Reaper community, you are intimately involved in that. You are so much more involved in that particular action than, say, an F-15, F-18 driver that shows up, drops their weapon, and then flies off. You have been there watching the subject, watching the target for hours, maybe days on end, and when the action happens, you're the one who has eyes on to see what happens, and they use you to make sure that the battle damage that occurred is what was required. When
you're away from a war zone and you don't actually experience the horrors of war, doesn't that numb the feeling of killing someone else? Because you're away from it, you don't actually experience, you don't see it. It's a blip on your screen.
No, absolutely not. And what I would say, again, the Predator operator is so much more involved in what is going on than your average fast mover jet fighter pilot or your B-52, B-1, B-2 pilot, who will never even see their target. They will be dropping when they get to a particular point. A Predator pilot has been watching his target, knows them intimately, knows where they are, knows what's around them. I would say it affects the UAS community much more.
Mm-hmm. But are you or your colleagues as drone operators, would you say, cut off from the controversy that the drone program causes in a wider sense?
Well, if you were talking about the Predator itself, like I say, it's far more intimate than we have ever been in actioning targets from the air, except for maybe for an A-10, where you are right there. And actually flying the aircraft and working the aircraft, it's nothing like a video game. It's far removed from that. But that removal actually places me closer to what is going on the ground, what I'm doing to help the forces that I am helping. I am much closer to them. I can hear the actual battle going on. I can hear the stress in their voice. I know that they are relying on me. I'm much closer to it. I can see it in very good detail. As far as the actual implementation of the weapon system, that is obviously a political calculation made by our leadership, and their calculus is way beyond our level.
So I just want to walk our viewers through the pros and cons for those who aren't aware. So the drones keep American soldiers safe while the enemy is killed, which is a great thing. I mean, who wouldn't agree with it? Killing the enemy without killing your own soldiers. On the other hand, innocent civilians die at an alarming rate. American think tank, the Brookings Institution, for instance, says in Pakistan, for every militant leader killed, 10 civilians also die. Then you also have the United Nations, who is even concerned that this might contravene international law. Do you consider the other side of the argument at all?
Well, there's 2 points there again, and you're probably talking about the Amnesty International. You're heading towards the Amnesty International report. I have not seen their evidence, so I can't intelligently say that the 2 particular strikes that they were talking about had happened or not happened. So I have a tendency to believe that, based on my own experience, that those figures are excessively inflated. I have seen, and me and my colleagues have jumped through many very, very restrictive hoops before we are allowed to employ, to the point that we have actually done damage to blue forces because we weren't allowed to employ. The one incident in Pakistan that Amnesty International talked about, I don't know their evidence, but a lot of things happen in that area that are unintended and not caused by the United States at all. For example, I personally watched a bomb emplacer blow himself up, and I don't know whether or not those 2 incidences happen to be from a strike, or did they happen to blow themselves up, or was there something planted on the ground that lady happened to walk over and trigger?
Mm-hmm. I just want to clarify something. When I ask you these questions, I just want you to know that no one doubts the initial intention being for the greater good. Because once again, who wouldn't want to kill an enemy without having your own soldiers die? But the truth is, it's not only the Amnesty International, but other think tanks as well and other organizations that have proven extensively that when the concept of drone is put in place and it starts to operate, it entails repercussions. It entails grave consequences that aren't dealt with. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. You're talking about collateral damage.
Yeah, I'm talking about collateral damage. And the fact that, for example, American government wouldn't talk about it. I mean, it only talks about the fact that drones are good. But it turns a blind eye on the fact that there is collateral damage, and it wouldn't give us the numbers of how much people are actually dying along with the terrorists.
Well, and I don't know, I do not know what numbers have been listed officially by the government. I can't speak intelligently about that. I can tell you, though, as our leadership thinks, and in their calculus, they have to weigh into the fact that we do need to action this. We do need to use force. We do need to protect our forces. Within that calculus, there is the collateral damage aspect of it. How much can we accept in what particular phase of the conflict? As the leadership figures that out, they obviously want to minimize that as much as possible for the obvious reasons you're talking about here. It's bad. It's a horrible thing when somebody dies that doesn't need to. And they want to minimize that. If you are going to minimize that, this is the weapon to use. This is like a surgeon walking into an operating room with a scalpel as opposed to an axe. the chances of collateral damage happening from a UAV strike who's been overhead a target for, well, for example, Zarqawi, 600 hours. The Predators flew on Zarqawi for 600 hours before they actioned that target. The knowledge gained, the capability, the ability to wait, the ability to strike when the time was right is so much better with this weapon system than has ever been experienced in any other phase of warfare in any other time.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever think or consider that maybe the leadership is turning a blind eye on collateral damage and not really getting too deep into the collateral damage problem because it's just so convenient the way it is? American soldiers aren't dying, and who really cares that others are? It's a clean war for America. Do you know what I mean?
I think that's a mischaracterization of our mindset. None of the leadership that I have ever dealt with, none of the rules that I have operated under have ever placed collateral damage on who really cares, because blue forces are okay. We have always been very, very, very conscientious of the image that our community is portraying and what responsibility we have to the people that we are trying to protect and trying to save in that country.
Mm-hmm. On a larger scale, Bruce, do you ever question America's policy on war on terror, for example?
No.
Mm-hmm.
No, I do not.
This is a question that I genuinely am curious about. Is there a regimental pride among drone operators? Would you want your child to serve as a drone operator, for example?
I would be proud if she did, yes.
All right, Bruce, we're going to take a short break, but when we come back, we'll talk more about drone missions and collateral damage they cause, as well as the future of unmanned warfare. Stay with us.
Wealthy British scion Zach Wilson, investment activist.
Markets, finance, scandal. Find out what's really happening to the global economy. For a no-holds-barred look at the global financial headlines, tune in to Kaiser Report on RT.
If you're thinking about an alcoholic drink associated with Russia, it's probably not going to be wine that springs into your head. But they've been making it here on the Black Sea coast for more than 2,000 years, and there's an industry which really can compete with the best the rest of the world has to offer. I've come to meet some of the people growing the grapes and to see if I can find out the secret to the perfect plonk.
It's alive. Oh, very nice.
Oh, that guy running? Like one dude. Fire, gun, fire, shoot the gun. They're taking fire.
War is probably the most complex and difficult of human activities.
Looking good. This bud's for you. Uh-oh. That's all right, he's dead too.
I think the phenomenon of friendly fire probably extends back to the invention of gunpowder.
I just killed a bunch of people, you know. Yeah, but we don't know which ones they are. They're friendlies, they're U.S. people.
Ready? I'm ready. It's filming.
This son of a shoots my brother in the leg, not intentionally, because it was nighttime. It was 4 in the morning.
Even the best commanders, even the best soldiers are going to make mistakes.
This whole idea of brotherhood and honor and camaraderie, in this sense, in this context, it has absolutely no place.
Welcome back. I'm here with Lieutenant Colonel Bruce Black, a retired U.S. Air Force drone pilot. Great to have you back. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the technical side of how that actually happens. Were there different types of missions, or did you always have to eliminate someone?
No. And I hesitate. It makes me cringe when I hear that question. 99.9% of my time, I am trying to gather intelligence and trying to keep people from being killed. I saved far more people, orders of magnitude more than I ever had to fire, including Afghanistan's and Iraqis. And 99% of our time is spent trying to get intelligence. For example, right now in Afghanistan, the way I understand it, it is very, very difficult, and it was very difficult in Iraq as we left, to fire. You get no intelligence from a dead person. You get very little.
But the so-called mission control boxes, they're usually placed out in a desert somewhere. Why are they so remote?
Well, we put them where they need to be. For example, they were in downtown Las Vegas at one time. It's just where the connectivity was. Where we launch and control the aircraft from happens to be in country, because that's we need to be in very close proximity to the aircraft, and it's on an Air Force base there in country where we launch the aircraft.
But you just mentioned Afghanistan and Iraq. Which other countries were on your mission list?
Those are the two I can talk about.
But,
sorry.
So how hard do you have to study the characteristics of the targeted areas, or did you have to blindly rely on the intelligence provided?
A little of both. What we used to say when I was on the Unmanned Aerial System Task Force is the only thing unmanned about UASs is that little piece of fiberglass on the end of a very long trail. For example, for every Predator cap, it takes 175 people to make it happen. For every Global Hawk, it can take up to 400. And most of that are people behind the scenes, working the intelligence, working the IT, working the communications. And oftentimes when I would step to the box or replace somebody in the box on a mission, I had a lot of data on what we were doing. Like I said, we'd been sitting on them for days, weeks, trying to figure out where people were going and what they were doing. Sometimes we would show up in the middle of a firefight and not know a thing, and be trying to build a picture at that point.
How much is shared about the purpose or specifics of a mission?
I will know a fair amount about what we are doing. I may not know the individuals. If it's data that I need to know, in particular, he drives a blue car with a sunroof. That they will tell me that, and they'll tell me who it is that we're following. Sometimes there are missions where I go and I wait, and I may not know why I'm waiting there at that particular time.
So you've said that 99% of your missions are monitoring, and then that 1% is maybe eliminating someone. When it comes to that 1%, are you the one who decides when to pull the trigger?
And that varies with the phase of war that we are in. Early in the Iraq and the Afghanistan war, it was much easier to loose a weapon. And you always worked with a ground crew. I might be following a convoy. If they came under attack, I would work directly with the ground controller, and he would tell us where he needs help. He would say, look up that arroyo, we're taking fire from that arroyo, and I would tell him what I'd see, and then he would clear me hot, and the decision was on me for when to fire. As the phase of war changed, those restrictions became greater and greater and greater. We could not loose weapons, and towards the end of our occupation in Iraq, we were weapons tight. It took an act of the president to say, yes, that's somebody we need to strike. Because again, you don't need to be killing people. You need to be arresting those people and getting the intelligence from them.
How do you know a terrorist from a civilian? Or does somebody else decide it for you?
Well, it's usually a guy pointing a weapon at somebody, or a guy digging a hole in the road, or in a field somewhere implanting a 105 millimeter shell with a wire attached to it. Actually knowing whether somebody is a terrorist or not comes from the intel that is gathered in many, many, many places and fed to us. We never action somebody just based on their shape. We don't do that. That's just not what we do. Oftentimes, I would see somebody carrying somebody that looked like a gun, and we wouldn't do anything because he was just carrying a gun. People have guns over there. We won't do it. We don't just walk around and kill people.
Oh, no. I'm not saying you just walk around and kill people. I'm saying when it comes down to pulling the trigger, how are you 100% sure that that is the person you're looking for, especially in a country where everyone is carrying guns? You know, a terrorist is not always wired up with explosives. He could be just walking around with a gun like a peaceful civilian who is also walking around with a gun. And this is a black and white screen after all, and you can't really see too well who is who.
Well, and two misconceptions there. One, it's only black and white when we're looking at them in infrared. And it's not just little figures. I can see how many fingers somebody is holding up, depending on how close I am flying to the subject. So we also have a very good day camera. But I'm not making my decisions on who to action based on what they look like.
I do want to get a little bit back to the civilian casualties. I get your position, because you think the numbers are greatly exaggerated and there haven't been, in your opinion, enough proof to actually talk about them. But we both agree that there are civilian casualties. So when that happens, is someone ever held responsible for that or not?
Yes, yes.
So how does that happen?
They are. I gave an interview earlier, and they asked if I'd ever seen an incident like that, and I couldn't remember one off the top of my head, and I thought about it later. There was one particular incident that I recall, and I'm not going to go into details in it, but instantly, whenever they think something like that has happened, that we caused, everything is, and I don't know how they do things in Russia, but like we do here in the United States, everything freezes that has to do with that particular incident, including the GCS and all the tapes, and everything is frozen and kept as evidence. And then a separate group, not in that squadron, somebody from somewhere else, comes and reviews the evidence and reviews everything that's going on, both on the side of the Air Force and on who we were supporting. If it was a special operations, or if it's Army, or if it's Navy, then that team will be put together and they'll do a regular investigation.
Does anyone go to prison, or is anyone suspended?
They could be suspensions. Yes, they could go to prison if it was willful.
Does something like that happen? Is there ever a willful thing?
I don't know of any. I don't know that I would know of somebody that had just decided to loose a weapon and kill someone. I would doubt that, because there's just too many people watching this. There's 175 people watching what you do, and everything you do is being recorded. So some cowboy is not going to get in a Predator and go gallivanting around Pakistan killing people.
Now, I know the military keep records of targets terminated during the missions. Do you know the approximate number that you've helped to eliminate, terrorists or people of your targets?
I do.
Okay. Is this something that actually, gives you force to go on, or is this something that you don't want to think about?
It's something I put aside. It's not something, you don't sit in the bar and count the notches on your gun. You don't, and anybody that does needs to be talking to somebody with help. It's not a proud thing. Mm-hmm. It's something you have to do, and you do your job.
Mm-hmm. But you won't tell us the number, would you?
No.
Okay. So the other thing with civilian casualties is that, for example, when people are living in Yemen, for example, or Pakistan, see these drones flying around, and, they kill the terrorists, but along with the terrorists, they kill however many civilians they kill. then this really incites controversy and negative feelings towards the United States. Couldn't that actually be inciting terrorism even more?
I don't know how it would get worse. The incitement is happening because of the stories that get told and the misconceptions that happen, and who controls the ground there, who can actually walk up to the huts and say, you see that airplane overhead? You see overhead, he's going to kill your children. That's what they're here for. They're here to kill your children. And their stories are wrong. And if terrorists are being incited, they're being incited out of falsehoods and lies.
Did you ever stop to think that such a high-tech weapon as a drone, how could that be that it could still target someone precisely and yet kill someone that you weren't targeting?
Accidents, proximity, loosing the weapon on someone who is hiding among civilians, which they do quite often. Remember, these are the people that send their children in to blow others up. These are not fighters like we are used to. They like using civilians as human shields. I personally have called off strikes because the bad guys were in and around civilians, and were using civilian buildings as a hiding place.
Mm-hmm. You know, do you see future warfare being dominated by unmanned machines? You know, some are predicting, for example, that in the future drones will be able to carry out missions fully autonomously from people. Isn't that a bit scary? Like, wouldn't you be scared to wake up in a Terminator movie or something?
Well, yes, if it ever gets to Terminator stage, I would. But I do not, it doesn't scare me that drones are doing that, because remember, every Predator cap took 175 people to do it. It is far more controlled now than sending one guy out, one airplane out. I got 175 eyes looking at what I'm doing, making sure I'm doing it right, making sure that I'm hitting the right target, calling the strike. The president personally can call up any Predator feed down in the office and say, yay or nay. It's much more controlled than it is sending one person out with a bomb with what he thinks is the right target.
Mm-hmm. Bruce, thank you very much for this amazing interview, for this wonderful insight. Now, that's it for now, folks. My guest was Lieutenant Colonel Bruce Black, a retired drone pilot with the U.S. Air Force, and I will see you in the next edition of Sophie & Co.